Clara didn't even realize the argument had crossed the line until Daniel stopped looking at her like she was his wife and started looking at her like she was a problem he needed to remove. The bedroom felt colder than it should have been, not because of the weather, but because of the way his voice had changed. Flat, controlled, almost rehearsed. "You're always tired, always busy, always absent," he said, standing near the window with the city lights reflecting faintly behind him. "Do you even hear yourself anymore?" Clara exhaled slowly, trying to steady the rising pressure in her chest. "Daniel, I've been covering double shifts this week. You knew that." "I know what I see," he cut in. That sentence landed heavier than anything before it, not because it was loud, but because it was final. Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "We're arguing about a delayed bank statement. That's all this is. We can fix it in the morning." Daniel let out a short laugh that didn't contain any humor. "No, this isn't about a bank statement." Something in his tone made her pause. He turned away from the window and walked toward the dresser. Each step felt measured, deliberate, like he had already decided how this conversation would end, long before it started. Clara followed him with her eyes, confused now instead of angry. "Then what is it about?" He opened the top drawer. Inside was a small velvet box. For a second, Clara thought he was going to propose again, or maybe show her something sentimental from the past. Her mind searched for any version of this moment that made sense. But when he opened it, she saw her wedding ring inside. Her breath caught. "Why do you have that out?" she asked slowly. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up the ring between two fingers, studying it as if it belonged to someone else entirely. "I've been thinking," he said finally. Clara's stomach tightened. "About what?" His eyes lifted to hers. There was no hesitation in them, no softness, only decision. "I want it back." The silence that followed felt unreal. Clara blinked once. "You want the ring back?" "Yes." A beat passed. "And I want you to leave." The words didn't register at first, not because she didn't hear them, but because her mind refused to accept that they were meant for her. "Leave?" she repeated quietly. Daniel nodded once, as if confirming an order rather than ending a marriage. Tonight, Clara gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Daniel, what are you talking about? This is our home." He finally stepped closer, holding the ring out toward her. "It's not working anymore. You're not here even when you're here." "That's not a reason to—" "You've already checked out," he interrupted sharply. "Don't pretend you haven't." Her voice cracked slightly now. "So your solution is to kick me out over a ring in a bad week?" "It's not about the week." His tone dropped lower. "It's about respect." The word hit her harder than expected. Respect. As if everything she had done, working late, managing bills, carrying stress he never bothered to see, had all been a sign of disrespect. Clara looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something familiar. Something that reminded her of the man she had married. But there was nothing, only certainty. He stepped forward again, and without asking, took her hand. He slid the ring off her finger in one smooth motion. Her skin felt suddenly exposed. She didn't stop him, not because she agreed, but because she was too stunned to react. "There," he said quietly, placing it back into the box. "Now it's settled." Clara stared at her empty finger. It felt unreal, like her hand didn't belong to her anymore. "You're serious?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He simply closed the box and placed it back in the drawer. Then he walked past her toward the door. "Pack what you need," he said without turning around. "You can go to your sister's." Clara remained frozen in the center of the room, watching him as if the walls had shifted without warning. Outside the bedroom, the house was quiet, too quiet. And then, as Daniel reached the hallway, she heard something that didn't belong to the moment at all. A faint sound from downstairs, a floorboard creaking, followed by something even softer. Movement. Daniel stopped walking. For the first time that night, His posture changed. Not anger, not control, something closer to alertness. Clara noticed it too, because whatever was happening downstairs wasn't part of their argument, and Daniel suddenly wasn't alone in his decision anymore. Clara stood in the bedroom doorway for several seconds after Daniel walked out, as if the house itself had forgotten how to continue. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was charged, waiting for something to snap. Downstairs, the faint noise came again. A soft creak, then another. Clara's pulse, which had been scattered by the argument, suddenly sharpened into focus. She turned her head slightly, listening. Daniel was already moving down the hallway, not rushing, not panicking, just moving with a quiet stiffness that didn't match. Someone who had just thrown his wife out of the house. Clara followed at a distance, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. The air felt different now, thicker, heavier, as if the house had become aware that something had shifted inside it. As they reached the staircase, Daniel stopped at the top step. Clara almost bumped into him. "Did you hear that?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the lower floor, where the living room lights were still on. The glow spilled into the hallway like a warning. "I heard something," he said finally. Clara swallowed. Maybe it's just." "It's not." The certainty in his voice made her go silent. Another sound came from below, this time clearer. A drawer closing. Clara's stomach tightened. There shouldn't be anyone down there. Daniel didn't respond. He simply started down the stairs. Clara hesitated for a second before following. Each step felt slower than the last, like the house was resisting their movement. By the time they reached the bottom, the living room was fully visible. Everything looked normal at first glance. The sofa was in place, the coffee table untouched, the TV off, but something was wrong. The front door, it was slightly ajar. Clara's breath caught. "I locked it," she whispered. Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes were scanning the room now, sharp and calculating, like he was trying to reconstruct what had happened in their absence. Then the sound came again, a soft shuffle. From the kitchen, Clara instinctively stepped closer to Daniel, despite everything that had just happened between them upstairs. The fear was stronger than the anger now. Daniel moved first, walking toward the kitchen with controlled steps. The light from the hallway stretched across the floor, illuminating part of the countertop, and a shadow that moved behind it. Clara froze. Someone was inside. Daniel reached the edge of the kitchen entrance and stopped. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house felt completely still. Then a voice came from inside. "You came down faster than I expected." Clara's blood ran cold. That voice, she knew it. Not from strangers, from memory. Daniel's expression changed instantly. Not shock, but recognition mixed with something darker. "You," he said. The figure stepped slightly into view. A man stood near the counter, calm, almost too calm for someone who had broken into a home. His hands were visible, empty, as if he wanted to show he wasn't immediately a threat. Clara's mind struggled to process what she was seeing, because this wasn't a random intruder. This was someone connected to Daniel, someone who had once been part of conversations. He always shut down when she entered the room. "Get out," Daniel said coldly. The man didn't move. Instead, he glanced briefly toward Clara. That small glance changed everything in Daniel's posture. Clara noticed it immediately. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. "Interesting timing," the man said quietly. "She's here too." Clara frowned. "Who are you?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't need to answer that." But the man ignored him completely. "I was starting to think you'd never tell her the truth yourself." Silence dropped like a weight. Clara looked between them. "What truth?" Daniel stepped forward sharply. "Enough." The man raised one hand slightly. Not aggressive, just enough to pause the moment. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "I came because things are already in motion." Clara felt a strange sinking sensation in her chest. "What things?" For the first time since she came downstairs, The man looked directly at her without hesitation. "Things your husband has been trying to keep from you." Daniel snapped, "Stop talking!" But it was too late. Clara could feel it now. The shift in the room. The way nothing was accidental anymore. The argument upstairs. The ring. The sudden eviction. It all felt smaller now, like pieces of something larger she hadn't seen yet. The man stepped back slightly, closer to the kitchen counter. "I'll leave," he said calmly. "But not before you tell her why I'm really here." Daniel didn't move, and Clara realized something chilling. Whatever this was, Daniel hadn't just thrown her out of the house. He might have been trying to keep her away from what was already inside it. Clara stood in the center of the living room, unable to tell whether the air had become heavier, or if it was simply her awareness finally catching up to what her eyes were seeing. The man near the kitchen counter hadn't moved since Daniel told him to leave. He stood with a strange calmness, like someone who had already accepted the outcome of this night, long before stepping into the house. Daniel, on the other hand, looked completely different now. Upstairs, he had been decisive, controlled, almost coldly certain, when he removed the ring from Clara's finger and told her to leave. But down here, that certainty was beginning to fracture, not in words, but in posture, in silence, in the way his jaw tightened every time the stranger spoke. Clara noticed everything now, because now she had nothing else to hold on to. "What is going on?" she asked again, slower this time, her voice steadier but quieter. Neither man answered immediately. The silence stretched. Then the stranger shifted slightly, leaning his shoulder against the kitchen counter, as if he had all the time in the world. "That's a better question than you think," he said. Daniel's eyes snapped toward him. "Don't." The warning was sharp, but the stranger ignored it. Clara turned toward Daniel. "Don't what? Don't ask questions in my own house?" The words hit harder than she intended, but they landed exactly where they needed to. Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second, and Clara saw it. The hesitation told her more than any explanation could have. The stranger pushed himself off the counter and took a small step forward, stopping at a distance that still felt deliberate, controlled. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight," he said, "but I didn't think you'd find out this way." Clara frowned. "Find out what?" Daniel exhaled sharply. "This is not the time." "It's exactly the time," the man replied calmly. "She's already involved." Clara's heart began to beat faster. Involved in what? No one answered immediately. Instead, Daniel walked a few steps away, rubbing his hand over his face like he was trying to erase the situation entirely. It didn't work. The stranger continued. "Your husband and I used to work together," he said. Clara blinked. "Work?" Daniel cut in immediately. "That's enough." But the man didn't stop. "Not the kind of work he told you about," he added. Clara turned slowly toward Daniel. The change in the room was subtle, but irreversible. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was exposure. Something buried was starting to surface, whether Daniel wanted it or not. "That's not true," Daniel said firmly, but his voice lacked the certainty it had upstairs. Clara took a step back without realizing it. "Then tell me what is true." For the first time, Daniel didn't respond immediately. That silence was louder than any confession. The stranger watched him carefully, then spoke again. "There was a project," he said. "Money, accounts, transfers that weren't exactly legal. Your husband was responsible for the financial side." Clara's mind struggled to keep up. "That doesn't make sense. He works in logistics." Daniel finally snapped. "Stop talking about things you don't understand." But Clara wasn't looking at the stranger anymore. She was looking at Daniel, really looking at him, for the first time since she had met him. She realized she didn't actually know what he did when she wasn't around. Not fully, not clearly. The stranger continued, voice steady. "I didn't come here to ruin anything," he said. "I came because someone is looking for missing records, and they believe Daniel has them." The words hung in the air like something physical. Clara frowned. Missing records? Daniel's expression tightened immediately. That reaction alone was enough. Clara took another step back. You told me this was about a bank statement. Danielle's voice rose slightly. It is not what he's making it sound like. But the stranger shook his head. It's worse, he said quietly. Much worse. Clara felt her stomach drop. The living room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had shifted inward. She looked between them again. One man refusing to explain. One man explaining too much. And neither of them seemed to realize that the balance of control in this room had already changed. I want the truth, Clara said firmly now. Both of you stop talking around it. Silence. Daniel finally looked at her directly, and what she saw in his eyes was no longer anger. It was calculation. That scared her more than anything else, because it meant this wasn't a sudden argument. It was a situation that had been waiting for her to discover it. The stranger stepped back toward the kitchen doorway. I've said what I needed to say, he added. The rest is between you two. Danielle's voice turned cold. You should leave. This time the stranger agreed, but before he moved, he looked at Clara one last time. And what he said next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. You didn't walk into a marriage problem, he said. You walked into a cover-up. Then he left through the side door, letting it close softly behind him. The house fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of a broken argument. It was the silence of something fully exposed. Clara stood there, staring at Daniel. And Daniel, for the first time since the beginning of the night, had no immediate response ready.